Good evening and welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Cassie Knievel and I am a proud K-State student and Food for Thought member. In the fall of 2009, a group of undergraduate, graduate, and veterinary students got together informally to discuss the growing disconnect between the public and agriculture. The result was the creation of Food for Thought, a grassroots group of K-State students and young alumni who seek to bridge this gap. The average consumer is 2 generations removed from the farm. As a result, interest in where food comes from and how it is produced is rapidly growing among consumers of all backgrounds. Food for Thought believes it is our duty to provide our peers and community members with accurate, factual information about agriculture and to provide opportunities to discuss food production. In addition to bringing speakers to campus, Food for Thought maintains a social media presence via Twitter, a blog, and Facebook, and partners with agricultural organizations across Kansas to promote agriculture to audiences throughout the state. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Kansas Farm Bureau, Frontier Farm Credit, the Kansas Livestock Association, and Collegiate Cattlemen's and Collegiate Cattlewomen for their support of Food for Thought and the Upson Lecture Series. Through their time and donations, we are able to educate others about agriculture and its role in feeding the world. Please help me in thanking them. We are currently engaged in fundraising efforts to solidify the existence of the Upson Lecture Series as a fully endowed program, which ensures its existence indefinitely. Please contact Food for Thought at ksfoodforthought@gmail.com or any Food for Thought member personally to learn how you can become part of this wonderful event at K-State. If you would like to learn more about Food for Thought and connect with us or are interested in becoming a member, please pick up material on your way out. In November 2010, Food for Thought hosted a lecture by world-renowned animal behaviorist Dr. Temple Grandin. It was announced at that event that Dr. Grandin was the first in a series of speakers in the new Dr. Dan Upson Lecture Series. Dr. Upson taught in Kansas State's College of Veterinary Medicine in the Department of Animal Science for 35 years before retiring with emeritus status in 1994. Dr. Upson has received several awards for his outstanding dedication to the classroom in the veterinary profession, including the Norden Distinguished Teaching Award in 1968, 77, and 91. The All-University Undergraduate Teaching Excellence Award, the Outstanding Educators Award, the Kansas Veterinary Medical Association Veterinarian of the Year Award in 1982, and the Award of Excellence from the American Association of Bovine Practitioners in 1994, as well as Kansas State University's highest award, the Alumni Medallion. When you think of K-State's history in agriculture and veterinary medicine, nobody has had a bigger impact on teaching students than Dr. Dan Upson. Dr. Upson has made numerous contributions through his years of teaching on our campus and continues to work with the beef industry and veterinary profession in the state and beyond. Please join me in acknowledging Dr. Dan Upson. Please stand. Our guest today is Dr. Jude Capper. She's an independent sustainability consultant based in Bozeman, Montana, and holds adjunct professor and affiliate positions at Washington State University and Montana State University. Jude's current research and outreach work focuses on modeling the environmental impact of livestock production systems, specifically dairy and beef. Current research projects include comparisons of historical and modern production practices in dairy and beef industries, and the effect of technology use and management practices on the environment. She has an active social media presence and spends a considerable amount of time debunking some of the more commonly heard myths relating to resource use and the environmental impact of livestock production. Her primary professional goal is to communicate the importance of livestock industry sustainability and the factors affecting sustainability to enhance the knowledge and understanding of stakeholders within food production, from the rancher and the farmer to the retailer, policymaker, and consumer. Jude's message is important to all of us as we represent those stakeholders and depend on a stable food supply, especially with a drastic increase in population by 2050. Please take this opportunity to learn more about this important aspect of feeding the world and join me in welcoming Dr. Jude Capper.
Thank you. Okay, this is on. Thank you. Can everyone hear me at the back? Am I loud enough? Just want to check. Okay, fabulous. It is a pleasure to be here. Having heard the fabulous lists of accolades for Dr. Upson, I'm even more proud to be here because that is just amazingly fabulous. I would take my hat off to you, except obviously I don't have the hat, but it is wonderful to be here. Had a kind of eventful day with 2 hours in the ER, and I just noticed I still have the band on my wrist, so that makes me feel a little bit like a mental patient or something standing in front of you, so just ignore that bit. But it is a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to talk to you about something that I feel incredibly passionate about, something that I've been working on for, I guess, 5 of the 7 years that I've been in the States now. I came over back in 2006 as a postdoc at Cornell, began working in ruminant lipid metabolism for about 18 months. And as part of that, my boss at the time asked me to write a paper on the environmental impact of RBST in the dairy industry. And to be honest, I had the perception that I think quite a few of us have or had back then, which was we're the animal science people in this building and the environmental green people do something over here in this building over here. And we don't really talk or correspond that much. But luckily for us, that paper just hit at the time when everybody was beginning to think about carbon and land use and water use and fuel. And for me now, this has become an all-consuming passion in terms of telling people what we do every day, helping the farmer and the rancher communicate better with those facts and those figures about agriculture and trying to debunk some of those myths like cattle are bad, cattle are killing the planet every single day. So my aim is to give all of you some of those talking points, some of those facts, some of those figures. If I haven't, if there are other things that you would like to know, please tweet me afterwards or add me on Facebook or email me or whatever it might be, okay? Because that is my plan, to give everybody those facts and figures to combat the huge amount of misinformation that's out there every single day. So with that, one of my main messages, and I apologize to some extent, I'm very much going to concentrate on beef. Nowadays, I work about 20% dairy, about 80% beef. So one of my main messages is that every single beef production system can, will, and should be sustainable. So whether it is Charolais calves in a cow-calf operation in eastern Montana, whether it is Brahman-type cattle in Australia, or whether it is native-type cattle in a large-scale feedlot in South Africa, any cattle production system can be sustainable, providing 3 things are in place. And the first one, the most important one, the one that's always been the most important and always will be, is economic viability. Does not matter whether you have 2 cows, 20 cows, 20,000 cows. Doesn't matter if they're Angus or Brahman or Belter Galloway. If that system isn't economically viable today, tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years, that farm or ranch isn't going to be in place. So economics for any business has always been the main driver, and it always will be, whether it's organic, whether it's local, whether it's grass-fed, corn-fed, feedlot, whatever it is. Economics is vital. But in contrast to 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we've got to think about two other components as well. And the first one is environmental responsibility. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody in the cattle industry, because that's exactly what we've been doing for the last 50 to 100 years. We look after the air, the land, the water, the animals every single day. Because again, if we didn't, we wouldn't have a farm and ranch in place. It just wouldn't happen. But often to the media, to the consumer, to the policymaker, there's a perception that agriculture was so much better back 100 years ago. It was sunny and green, cattle never belched or farted, and there was no ozone layer. You know, everything was good back in, let's say, 1923. Everything was perfect. Nowadays, we have big ag, we have CAFOs, we have factory farms. We obviously don't treat our animals well, or the soil well, or the air well, or the water well. Except that we do, and we've got to educate people better about how and why we do what we do every single day. Which leads me to the third one. Again, 10, 20, 30 years ago, people still had questions about food. But as Cassie said, people are having more and more questions now than they did in the past. And we have things like Facebook now, and Twitter, and LinkedIn, and Wikipedia, and Google. We have Yahoo, we have Dr. Oz, we have Oprah. We have all these people very, very willing and able to tell the whole world why we do what we do and how we do it. The problem is, to those of us in the ag industry, what they are saying is not always the truth, or it may even more damagingly be an outright lie. So we've got to be better at communicating with the consumer. So we've got these three pillars: economic viability, environmental responsibility, and social acceptability. Because if we don't have the social side, if we don't have a market for our beef, or our dairy, or our pork, or our poultry, then as an industry we won't exist in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. So those three pillars have to be in place. But if they are, any beef production system, or again, pork, dairy, poultry, can and will be sustainable, providing we have tools to the technologies, to the management practices that have kept us efficient and productive over the years. Again, the problem is often to the consumer, this word right here often means just organic, just grass-finished, just local, just artisan, just heirloom, any of these buzzwords. And these are all fabulous marketing terms. But conventional agriculture in the States has been sustainable, will be sustainable, and should continue to be sustainable into the future, again, if we can improve productivity and efficiency. Now, I took this picture here in Manhattan, New York, as opposed to Kansas, about 2 or 3 years ago now, in a food market. And I will still defend the right of anybody who wants to pay $29 per pound for grass-fed Eye of ribeye beef. That is their choice. I personally am going to buy corn-fed beef, which as a girl raised on grass-fed beef back in England, which is a different taste to corn-fed beef over here, I'll just put it that way. As a girl raised on grass-fed beef, I'm going to buy corn-fed beef over here, which has the plus of not costing $29 per pound, and spend the extra money on boots that are pretty comfortable, and I think they're pretty fabulous as well. But that's just my bias. But I will defend the rights of anybody to buy grass-fed beef, or organic beef, or local, artisan, belted Galloway, pampered beef. You know, it's absolutely their choice. And we all have that choice. We can eat beef, dairy, pork, chicken. We can be vegan, vegetarian. We should all have those options. But let's not push our personal choices onto other people, just because it's food-based as opposed to any other cultural aspect. So where does the beef industry have a huge opportunity? Well, simply here, all of this pasture, we can put beef animals on that. They graze and they efficiently digest that pasture every single day. And they make safe, affordable, nutritious beef for all of us to eat. That is a huge bonus for the beef industry compared to the, let's say, the pig industry or the poultry industry. And something, again, that's not understood by the consumer, and I'll come on to why more in about 12 slides time probably. Now the next slide, I always and ah whether to put it up or not. It totally depends on the audience. Sometimes it goes down really well. Sometimes, quite frankly, I think people want to stone me out of the room for even putting something up. So this is a warning that if you are very easily offended, please look away now, as it were. But it's a means to give you an insight of how the anti-animal activist groups work, okay? Because they understand that sex sells and fear sells. So if you combine both in a poster, that gives out a pretty powerful message to quite a lot of people that eating a frankfurter or a pork chop or a chicken nugget or a hamburger may not be a positive thing. And they use shocking images. And they use messages that have a very powerful connotation. But they do it for a reason. Groups like PETA, HSUS, Greenpeace are highly powerful. They've got a lot of money. They've got a lot of people behind them. And they know the messages that gets across to the consumer every single day. And this is why in the ag industry, we really do face quite a challenge. Because at the moment, PETA has more than 3 million supporters on a global basis. In the States, we have 314 million people, and only 1 to 1.5 of them are employed in ag, all of ag, from grapes to apples to pork to beef to dairy. So we basically have 2.1 million farms and about 1.5 PETA supporters per farmer. And they have a really loud voice, and they are very, very active on Facebook and Twitter and Google and Wikipedia and so on about why agriculture is bad for the planet. So we face a big challenge, and they have demonstrations as well. This was in London, I think 2 years ago now. We've seen similar demonstrations in New York, and even in Bozeman only 18 months ago. And these get a lot of attention. This was one of the more child-friendly pictures I could post, because these two, well, child-friendly in quotes, because these two girls have no clothes on whatsoever. So not surprisingly, a bath filled with bubbles with 2 naked girls in it, it gets attention. People stop, people look, people think. And as a byproduct of that, they see this message. 50 baths equals 1 steak. Clean your conscience, go vegan. Again, it's a very powerful message to the consumer, 98% of whom do not understand animal agriculture. To my mom, who I love dearly and who has no understanding of animal ag at all, this would be, well, firstly, there's 2 naked girls in the middle of the stage, and why is my daughter talking about this? But secondly, it'd be, wow, 1 steak is 50 baths full of water. Maybe I shouldn't go for the steak. Maybe we should have the pork tonight, or the poultry, or perhaps even the tofu, or the vegetarian surprise Mexican dish, because that seems healthier for the planet. So we do face a big challenge, but unfortunately, unfortunately, I think it's not just the obvious activist groups, because many people do understand that PETA and HSUS are kind of out there, activist-type groups. But we also have data like this here. This is taken from the FAO report, Livestock's Long Shadow, came out in 2006 now. It was an excellent report. It was scientific. It was done by some very, very smart people, really educated people. The only problem was that in the report, they made a mistake. And the mistake was quoted in this, and it was quoted here, which is taken straight out of their summary of the report. On a global basis, animal agriculture accounts for 18% of total greenhouse gas emissions, which they cite as being more than transport at 13.5%. Not surprisingly, this went absolutely viral 7 years ago. It was all over everywhere you can think of, and I can guarantee now, if any of you Google on your iPhone or your Android animal ag greenhouse gases, it'll be 18%, 18%, 18%. They brought out a revised version of this about 2 months ago now. They now think the total number is somewhere between 11 and 13%, but it still sounds like too much. You know, to the consumer, if beef and dairy and pork and poultry account for, let's say, 12% of total emissions, that's evidence that we really shouldn't eat them, right? They must be killing the planet. So we have advertisements like this one from, again, an activist group, but this time with data, with numbers, and anything that we can back up with data and numbers automatically gains credibility. In a lot of cases, it doesn't matter if the data and the numbers are totally false. The 50 baths claim on the last slide is 6 times too high, but that's quoted all over the internet. And as we all know, once it's on the internet, A, it's fact, and B, it must be true, and C, it's quoted again and again and again and again, because it's reposted and retweeted and shared and liked by millions and millions of people. So we do face this absolutely massive challenge, which brings me on nicely to Meatless Mondays. Meatless Mondays had its 10th anniversary about 3 weeks ago now. The premise of Meatless Mondays, which began in the Northeast USA, is that going meatless one day, a Monday, fairly obviously, per week will single-handedly save the planet. You can drive your Hummer to work every single day, but if you swap the hamburger for the cheese salad, you're doing well, you're saving the planet for your kids and grandkids. Perhaps not surprisingly, LA City Council in California adopted this as their official way to cut the city's carbon footprint as of October 2012. So again, the perception is meat is so bad. Meat is single-handedly causing global warming, climate change, killing the planet, but if we just gave it up, everything would be okay. Except that with so many of these types of myths and mistruths, when we apply science to it, we see a different picture. Because according to the US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, meat production in the whole of the states accounts for only 2.1% of our national carbon footprint. So the other 97.9% comes from everything else: cars, hospitals, factories, universities, whatever it might be. Only 2.1% comes from meat. And in this instance, I mean beef, both from the beef and the dairy industry. I mean pork, I mean poultry, I mean goat, and I mean lamb. In this figure, we don't include horses because in theory we don't eat horses. So 2.1% comes from meat. But still, on a Monday, if you look at the Huffington Post, Time Magazine, Washington Post, Facebook, Twitter, Oprah, Food Network, any of these media sites, there will be tips and recipes on how to go meatless. Save yourself, save the planet, make the world a better place by eating the broccoli zucchini quiche on a Monday, and everything will be well. Except that, as I say, when we apply science, we see a different picture. There are 314 million people in the States right now, everybody from a teeny tiny baby to an elderly person. The supposition is that if they all gave up meat every Monday for a whole year, problem solved, save the planet, right? Except that that's really not the case. Because meat production accounts for only 2.1% of our total carbon footprint, even if we all gave it up every Monday for a whole year, our national carbon emissions would come down by less than 1/3 of 1%. Almost nothing. Now, I'm not here to say that we shouldn't do everything we can to cut carbon and water and land and fuel. Those are all positive things. But to imply we can simply do that by not eating meat 1 day per week is absolute nonsense. It simply doesn't add up, compared to all the other opportunities in terms of efficiencies that we have. Now, I should point out I am not here to bash veganism, vegetarianism, flexitarianism, fruitarianism, any of those choices. We all absolutely have those choices. We can choose the Reuben sandwich, we can choose the fish sandwich, we can choose the vegetarian, we can choose the vegan. We all have that option. Part of the reason I feel that I can say that is, back in high school when I was 15, in 1990-something, back in England, I was a vegan for 12 months. And quite honestly, I think I did it to irritate my parents, because it made my mom's life really difficult to cater for no dairy, no eggs, no milk, no beef, no pork, no chicken, etc., etc. Christmas dinner that year, I've got to tell you, it kind of sucked. But by the time I was 16, quite honestly, I was eating bacon as if pigs were going to go out of fashion tomorrow. And I haven't looked back. And I will not personally look back. I love beef, I love cheese, I love pork, I love poultry. As a pregnant lady, I think that's incredibly important for me, for my child. But I'm not going to tell any of you that you must eat beef, or you must eat dairy, or you must eat pork. Because we all have that choice and we all have that option. We should continue to. Whether it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, we should have that option based on our cultural beliefs and options as to what we want to eat. Because we've got to look at the bigger picture here. One of the things that the consumer often doesn't understand is just how many things we get from the cattle industry every single day. It's not just about beef. Every picture on this slide, whether it's gummy bears, whether it's deodorant, whether it's fertilizer, comes from cattle in some way, shape, or form. I was recently told that I should change this particular slide because of this picture right here, camera film, with the supposition that it would get to the point where 80% of my audience hadn't ever used a film camera, and I felt really old at that point, I've got to tell you. Because I don't feel like I'm that old, but when I'm told those things, I feel really old. But it is true, you know, but all of these things, even dynamite has an input from the cattle industry. So it's not just about beef or dairy or pork. We use every bit of any animal that we possibly can to improve efficiency, to be the most resource active that we possibly can. What the consumer also doesn't often understand is that all of these industries, whether it's the sunflower industry, whether it's the fish industry, whether it's the apple industry, all of them give us byproduct feeds that can be fed to cattle every single day. So we can take things like peanut meal here, or pea silage, can't even see the peas here, pea silage here, or waste onions, which we don't want to eat or can't eat, and feed them to cattle to make safe, affordable beef and dairy every single day. If we didn't do that, what would be the carbon cost of all of these going into landfill? What would be the environmental cost of not using them? Cattle are the ultimate recyclers. They were recycling byproducts from the feed and the fiber industry way before any of us ever thought about saving cans and bottle tops and bottles every day. They are the ultimate environmental saviors in some ways, because we can use all of these things to make that safe, affordable beef. And as I say, we've got to think about the bigger picture. Let's assume that it isn't Tuesday, which I believe it still is, but let's assume it's Monday. And believe me, I could talk about this for 8 hours straight. I really, really could. So, in their wisdom, Food for Thought has given me 8 hours to talk about this. And it's Monday, so we're going to save the planet. We're going to go meatless. So for breakfast, we've had a delicious tofu and bean burrito. We're going to have a bean power bar at about 10, 10:30 in the break. We're going to have a bean and lentil casserole for lunch to keep us going. Bit of protein there, some nuts. We're going to have another bean power bar at 3 in the afternoon, say, and we're going to have a delicious bean and lentil banquet at maybe about 6. And we're all still sitting in this room talking to this girl who's talking about, beef and dairy and carbon emissions. And someone's had the misthought to shut all of the doors. So we've got 100 people, 150 people in here who've been eating beans and pulses all day. It's not going to be a pleasant place to be, is it? Because we make methane as well. It's not just the cows, it's not just the sheep, it's not just the goats, it's people. So if we're going to think about whole-scale dietary change, we've got to do it from more of a big picture aspect. We've got to think about all of the consequences, all of the inputs, all of the outputs, rather than thinking it's as simple as, if I just change the hamburger for the cheese sandwich, I'm doing a good thing. Now, the other claim that's often made by the likes of PETA and HSUS is that, well, eating meat is bad because it kills things. And, it's true. Unless you like your beef very, very rare, you're going to have to kill that cow before you eat it. It is just how the world works, right? Well, according, again, to PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the average person in the States eats 198 animals per year, which seems like a huge number. But the 198 figure right here includes shrimp, for example. So this is actually, I think it's about 10% of a cow per person per year, 20% of a pig, but something like 10 chickens and like 142 shrimp per person per year is this average number. But I found this data in a paper from Australia, which I read last fall now, and it really put it into context for me, because the perception is, well, if an animal is an animal is an animal, and the cow is the same as a chicken is the same as a shrimp, surely we should be concerned about these cute little mice. And in Australia, they have mice plagues about every 5 to 10 years. So on average, per 500 pounds of plant protein harvested, it's going to kill 125 times more animals, if a mouse is the same as a cow, than harvesting the same amount of beef in a grass-based system. So to imply that we kill fewer animals if, as I say, a mouse is a cow, is a pig, is a sheep, is absolutely wrong when we think about eating beef versus eating a vegetarian or a vegan type diet. Then the other myth that we often hear is, well, it's because we farm the livestock now. Back in the 1860s, buffalo roamed the plains. Life was good. They just roamed. They didn't overgraze, of course. I have been told by so many people that buffalo don't overgraze. And they didn't in the 1860s because there were no fences. Grass goes from here, they move over here. Grass goes from here, they move over here. Now we have fences. Any animal in a paddock will overgraze when the grass gets too low unless they're moved. It's just how the world works. But buffalo aren't generally a massive part of our farmed livestock in the States. So there is this perception that anything not farmed, buffalo, deer, elk, obviously don't have a carbon footprint. Except, of course, buffalo are just basically cows with really big heads. That's kind of how they work. So all of these buffalo in Yellowstone Park have no carbon footprint, right? They're a tourist attraction. We can take pictures of them. It's like the Wild West. It's fabulous. Except, as I say, they're basically cows with a big head. So the average buffalo, or bison, I should say, emits about as much carbon as a 1,200-pound Angus cow, which, to put it into context, is like driving 4,777 miles. That's one heck of a long road trip from Bozeman, where I live. You can do it if you just about drive from Bozeman to the tip of Florida and back again, but it's still one heck of a road trip. So to imply that a non-farmed animal has no carbon impact, or water impact, or land impact is absolutely not true. But again, we hear this myth every single day. It's modern agriculture to blame. Modern ag is bad. So the question is, what have we done in the beef industry over the last 30 or so years? Well, our animals have got bigger. This is hot carcass weight per animal. We're going from 1977 here, 2007 here, 2027 out here. This is work that we published in the Journal of Animal Science about 2 years ago now. And our animals have got bigger. So in 1977, the average animal gave us about 603 pounds of hot carcass weight beef. By 2027, it's about 773 pounds, because now we're slaughtering at about 1,300 pounds. Question is, as we go further and further and further out, how much bigger can we get? Can we be slaughtering animals at 3,000 pounds, 4,000 pounds, 5,000 pounds, 6,000 pounds? Can we have a beef cow effectively as big as an elephant? Well, in terms of nutrition, genetics, management, maybe we can. In the dairy industry, they have quadrupled milk yield between 1944 and 2007. Can we do that with beef? Well, probably not. Apart from anything else, from a packing point of view, from a retailer point of view, from a portion size point of view, we're about as big now as we can get without changing the packing industry. To my brothers, of which I have 3, the idea of a 100-ounce T-bone is just like heaven on a plate, I would just be fabulous. But to most people, that's just too much beef, and it's too much beef per carcass for the packing industry to handle. But while we have a huge opportunity in terms of, again, improving productivity, improving efficiency, and therefore cutting environmental impact, is to grow our beef faster, to have them be the most efficient beef they can be, while maintaining health and welfare as well. It's not just about the fastest growing animal, it's about the most efficient animal because it's both healthy and it grows fast. And we have achieved that, again, over the last 30 years or so. So again here, we're going to compare 1977 on the left, 2007 on the right, and we're making the same amount of beef. But because we've got that increase in carcass weight from 603 pounds in 1977 to 773 pounds in 2007, we needed 5 animals back then. Nowadays, we only need 4. So 5 animals, 5 lots of feed, 5 lots of waste, 4 animals, 4 lots of feed, 4 lots of waste. So we saved resources per unit of beef. And that's because of that carcass weight increase, as I say. But what's had a bigger impact are the gains in nutrition, in management, in welfare, and in genetics over that time. Because back in 1977, on average, it took 609 days to raise one animal from birth to slaughter. Nowadays, it takes 485 days. So we've saved 124 days of land, of water, of feed, of fuel. So if we multiply out the 5 animals times 609 compared to 4 animals times 485, you can see that in 1977, it took us just over 1,900 days to make the same amount of beef. Just over 3,000 days to make the same amount of beef as it took us just over 1,900 days in 2007. We've effectively saved 1,100 days of resources while making the same amount of beef. Modern agriculture is greener than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. And the other positive is that if it takes less time, we have an economic impact as well. There is a direct correlation between environmental impact and economic impact, which ties into the economic viability both for the rancher and for the consumer. So if we do look at it on a big picture basis, we look at absolutely everything that goes in to making 1 pound of beef, from the manufacture of the pesticides and herbicides to grow crops, all the way through transportation of the animals to the slaughterhouse door. So it's everything apart from actually slaughtering and packing those animals. Again, 1977 is right here, the purple line, green bars, 2007. Because we've improved carcass weight, because we know better how to grow and look after our animals every single day, in 2007 we only need 70% of the total animals to make a pound of beef. That's cows, heifers, bulls, and steers. Because we need fewer animals for less time, we need less feed, we need less water, which is going to be a huge issue in the future, because people can't see and touch carbon, but water they understand the importance of. Water has come down by 12% per pound of beef, and land use has come down by a third, 33% decrease. And again, this one's going to be huge. I had a very, acrimonious conversation, I would say, with a guy from, I can't remember if it was Peter or HSUS, I think it was HSUS. And he had a stand outside the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. This was back, probably 4.5 to 5 years ago now. And he has all of these banners like beef is bad and dairy is bad and veal is bad, and so on, so on, so on. So I went up and I did my best dumb English person impression, which is actually a very convincing dumb English person impression because I am at heart a dumb English person. And I went up and I said, well, tell me about this beef being bad and this dairy being bad. Oh, yes. So he gets all pumped up, all 4'2" of him. He gets, I shouldn't say that, that's a bit rude. But he was quite short and he did look quite sickly. Anyway, so he gets all pumped up. And he says, well, those beef farmers and dairy farmers, they're really bad. Oh, really? Why? What do they do? Tell me about it. And he told me two things that will stick with me forever. And the first one is the more shocking or interesting, I guess, and it's about dairy. And he said, do you know why strawberry milk is pink? I was like, oh, no, well, I guess it's because they put strawberries in it and some coloring and, blah, 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 blah. He says, no. Strawberry milk is pink because it's full of blood. Really? Wow, I never knew that. That's so interesting. Because milk nowadays comes from CAFOs and factory farms where they mistreat their animals. The animal's milk is full of blood. They have to dye it pink to get rid of the color, so therefore they're duping you, the consumer. And I know it's nonsense, and I hope to goodness that all of you know it's nonsense. But again, to my mom, bless her, she'd be going, oh my goodness, I'm never going to drink this again. This is terrible, The second one was about land. And again, it is less shocking. But he's stood there with a straight face. And he says, ma'am, on any patch of land, it doesn't matter where it is, if you can grow grass, you can grow corn. Which I found interesting when I moved to Montana. Because I love my state, and I moved there because it's beautiful, and I personally think it is the most beautiful state in the world, and it's gorgeous. But I will freely acknowledge that if we have a hill like this, with 6 inches of rain per year that's full of rocks, you cannot grow corn. You can try to broadcast some seed, and you might get 2 little shoots come up, and you could go and hand pick them. But you can't grow corn in every patch of land in the world. But to the activists, oh, of course you can. Any bit of land, we could grow so much more efficient plant protein on it than we could grow beef. And yesterday I wasted a good 23 minutes of my time having a Twitter argument, which, as a side note, is the most futile thing you can ever do in your entire life. But a Twitter argument, arguing in 140 characters at a time, as to why beef is better than plant protein in some instances, like in my home state where we have a lot of beef and we have very little corn because we can grow beef and we can't grow corn. So the supposition that on any patch of land we can grow anything from apples to artichokes to corn to cabbages is simply not true. And if anybody does still think that, then I think K-State might want to work on cropping lectures a little bit more, because obviously something may be going a little bit wrong. But simply by improving productivity, improving efficiency, understanding better how to treat, how to care for, how to breed, how to feed our cattle every single day, The beef industry has cut its land use by 1/3 per pound of beef over the last 30 or so years. And the carbon footprint right here has come down by 16% per pound of beef. If that was achieved by Apple or IBM or Elanco Animal Health or any other company in the world, that would be all over the media every single day. But because it's the beef industry, no one really talks about it. And we need to be talking about it. We need to be telling people why we've done a good job every single day. Because as I say, there are so many people out there willing to say big, bad, modern ag is a really bad thing. This is where I have to come back to my first couple of slides. Every beef production system can be sustainable. Because believe me, I'm not here to bash any particular system. I'm not here to say corn-fed good, grass-fed bad, or local good, organic bad, or any of those things. Any system can be sustainable, economically, environmentally, socially. But mismarketing drives me really, really, really crazy. I get really irritated by it. And by that, I mean my beef must be better than your beef, because I don't use product X and I do use product Y. Especially when, as I showed about 12 slides ago, when it's based on fear. So we have advertisements like this, no hormones, no antibiotics, no chemicals. The supposition being that if you buy this other beef over here, it's chock full of hormones and antibiotics and chemicals, and we all know those are going to kill you and your kids, so you'd better buy my beef, which by coincidence costs $29 per pound, you know. We even have quotes like this one, and this is from Michael Pollan. He's a journalism professor at UC Berkeley. He's the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, book which came out in 2006 or so now. I haven't met him. It's probably a good thing. I don't think we'd get on extremely well. It might end up in some kind of fight. But this guy is smart. He makes one heck of a lot of money, more than me and more than I would guess any of us do, going out, doing talks, telling people what they should eat every single day. He's the guy that coined the kind of catchphrase, if your grandmother wouldn't recognize it, then you shouldn't eat it, you know, basically. Which means my diet would admittedly be very different, because my grandma wouldn't recognize many of the things I eat, like tacos and burritos, for example. I mean, anyway, so this guy is smart. He does write in a very good way. He's entertaining, he's clear, he's simple. The Omnivore's Dilemma sold millions of copies, probably even billions now, I should think, of copies. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. Not because it's going to make you happy. Not because it's going to make your life better in quite a lot of cases. Not because it'll do anything for those of you who are over 21 for your beer bill, or in my case, my Jack Daniels bill. Bearing in mind that I read this book not in the last 7 months, but about 5 or 6 years ago now. Because if you are associated with the ag industry, it will make you angry, because there's so much in there which has a little bit of truth and then quite a lot of stuff that's not true at all, you know? But it's easy to understand, it's clear to the consumer, it paints a very compelling portrait of animal and crop ag in the States, and this is how it is, and this, folks, is why you shouldn't buy, for example, conventional dairy, corn-fed beef, you know, corn in general, in fact, and so on and so on. So he has this quote, and this was in the New York Times now back in 2002. We have succeeded in industrializing the beef calf, turning what was once a solar-powered ruminant into the very last thing we need, another fossil fuel machine. So again, to my mom, who I love dearly, the image is we take these cute little baby calves, or as I've been told by so many people, surely calves are born in the feedlot. Whole new conversation. But anyway, we take these baby calves and we pump them full of corn and soy and hormones and antibiotics, and we expect people to eat that beef, when instead they could be buying grass-fed beef. And not surprisingly, people go, wow, this seems really bad. So we're going to talk about the environmental impact of grass-fed beef. And again, this is not anti-grass-fed beef. It's really, really, really not. But it's just showing you the science versus the perceptions. Because in a grass-based system, just like us eating celery and cabbage, as opposed to, let's say, steak and pasta, if animals are on a forage-based diet, they don't grow as fast. It takes them more days overall, and in a grass-based system, they're going to give us about 185 pounds less hot carcass weight per animal. So we get less beef per animal, and it takes us more days, about 50% more total days, 22 months compared to 15 months. So what that means is, to make a set amount of beef, we need more animals, and it takes us more days. So if we want to make the same 26.1 billion pounds of beef that we do every year in the States from a totally grass-based system, yeah, we can absolutely do it. But it comes at a cost. We need 131 million acres more land per year. To put that into context, that's 75% the land area of Texas in extra land to make the same amount of beef from a less efficient system. In terms of carbon emissions, they're going to increase by 135 million metric tons. Get in context, that's like adding 27 million cars to the road every single year. And in terms of water use, which, as I say, is going to be the really big one, because even the most ignorant person knows that plants need water, animals need water, we need water. In a drought, as many of us had last year, water became a huge issue. If we converted the entire industry to grass-fed beef overnight, we could do it again, as I say, but we'd need 468 billion gallons more water every single year. To put that into context, as I said earlier, there's about 314 million people in the States at the moment. So if we assume 2 people per household, we've got about 150 million households. This increase, 468 billion gallons, is the annual usage of 53 million households. So it's like adding 1/3 more people to the States every single year in terms of water use. It's a huge, huge, huge impact. Now, as I say, I'm not here to bash grass-fed beef and to say it's bad or it's wrong. We all absolutely have that choice. But we should make it a scientific choice. And I did, as I say, grow up on a grass-fed beef for the first 28 or so years of my life. Now, there is one more thing to touch on with grass-fed beef versus corn-fed beef. And if I had more time, I could talk about both for hours and hours and hours and hours. But there is a supposition out there that we should eat grass-fed beef because it contains omega-3 fatty acids. And it does. 2 in particular called EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. And those are really important. And they're good for us in terms of heart health, in terms of eye health, in terms of brain development. They're the same long-chain fatty acids that we also find in fish. I was on a panel in Minnesota, 4 years ago now, with a grass-fed guy. And he kept coming back to, over and over again, well, it uses more land and more water and more carbon, but it's got good fats in it. And it does, it's absolutely true. Except there's only one issue with that. The proportion of EPA and DHA in grass-fed beef is about this big. It's pretty small. Whether it's in grass-fed beef or corn-fed beef, and there is more in grass-fed beef than corn-fed beef, but it's only a small increase. The supposition is often, if we want EPA, if we want DHA, we should eat grass-fed beef rather than fish. Except that if we have 6 ounces of salmon right here, to get the same amount of bioactive omega-3 fatty acids, particularly EPA, we need to eat 43.5 ounces of grass-fed beef to get the same amount as in 6 ounces of salmon. That's not to say that grass-fed beef is bad, because in terms of corn-fed beef, the number would probably be about 88 ounces. What I'm saying is we eat beef for zinc and iron and protein and vitamin B6 and vitamin B12 and riboflavin and all of the other micronutrients. Why are we selling beef on terms of something that's very, very, very small as a proportion, as opposed to all the other fabulous things that it has in it? So what do consumers want on the label? According to research, and as with any research, it depends how you ask the question, obviously, but according to research, they want to know about growth hormones, they want to know about medication use, living conditions, and raising systems. So should we give the consumer what they want? Possibly so. More information is good, right? Knowledge is power. But then we have advertisements like this one, not surprisingly from an anti-animal ad group, with not the most attractive Hereford animal I've ever seen. I think they pick this particularly ugly one just to look ugly somehow, because he is not the happiest looking Hereford bull in the world. But anyway, the text here, which you may or may not be able to read. Ingredients: estradiol, estradiol benzoate, testosterone propionate, progesterone, Serenal, TBA, MGA, which for those beef people out there I always find funny, because MGA we give to girl cows in the feedlot. This is obviously not a girl, fairly obviously a boy. And then beef. So again, to the consumer, it says chemical hormone, chemical hormone, chemical hormone, scary name, frightening thing, chemical hormone, and there's some beef. So as a mom-to-be, or as a aunt of two beautiful nieces, should I be buying this beef and feeding it to my kids? Obviously not. It's going to do bad things to them. Because everybody knows beef is full of hormones and dairy is full of hormones, right? And hormones are going to kill us. And actually hormones are going to kill us, but in most cases it'll be when we're 87 and not, 30-something, or even 20-something, or even 50-something, depending who exactly I'm talking to. But I have had that conversation with so many people, and I don't want to be sexist here, but it's almost always women with kids between the ages of 20 and let's say 45 to 50. Because we care about our kids, which is good. And we care about what we eat and what our kids eat, which again is good, it's logical, it makes sense. And the conversation goes something like, well, we don't eat beef and dairy anymore. And I get a bit insulted and stand up a bit straighter and ask them why. Well, it's so pumped full of hormones. Those ranchers, those feedlot guys, those dairy guys, they give those cattle all those hormones every day, and the beef's so full of them, and that's why our children have breasts when they're 3, and they're 7'6" when they're 12, It's all because of the hormones in the beef and dairy industry, and we know this because we've been on Wikipedia, and that's what it said, so it is obviously fact. At which point I kind of sigh and we get into that conversation. So it is the hormones in beef conversation. But I think it is an important conversation to have. There is no doubt that beef from an animal given a hormone implant does have more estrogen than beef from a non-implanted animal. That is true. It's about 45% more estrogen. So if we have an 8-ounce steak from an animal not given an implant, that's going to contain 3.5 nanograms of estrogen. The same steak from an implanted animal, 5.1 nanograms of estrogen. Bearing in mind that 1 nanogram of estrogen as a concentration is a bit like a blade of grass on a football field. It's teeny tiny, teeny tiny. So we have implanted steak and we have non-implanted steak, and we've gone from this much to this much. It really hasn't changed hardly at all. It's still a very, very, very small concentration. But on a daily basis, for a day, a month, a year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in some cases, 100 million women globally take a teeny tiny little birth control pill. Again, it's teeny and tiny, but it contains 35,000 nanograms of estrogen. To put that into context, the average woman would have to eat over 3,000 pounds of beef per day to get the same amount of estrogen as she does in one teeny tiny little pill. I presented this data to the Wisconsin Cattlemen's Association back in January, and there was a guy at the front who did look as if he was fairly elderly. I think he'd been in the same chair since about 1941, to be honest with you. And he gave me the best line that I've ever heard about this data. Because he kind of wakes up a bit, and he looks at the slide, and he reads the slide, and he says, "Ma'am, I don't want to mess with the woman who can eat over 3,000 pounds of beef per day." Oh yeah. You are so right. Even generally, you don't want to mess with women, but that much beef, you really need to be scared of us, seriously. He was a very smart man. He was very wise. So the point is, we've got to put it in context. I was talking to some dietitians back in August now, and one of the girls there honestly said, "But what if you're trying to have an estrogen-free diet?" And I looked at her and I'm like, "Well, what are you going to eat? Like Diet Coke and salt?" I mean, because everything we eat, apart from salt and sugar, contains hormones. I mean, everything, whether it's an apple, whether it's a hamburger, whether it's a pork chop, it all contains hormones. Even cabbage. And I'm going to start a campaign against the cabbage farmers in the States. Because 1 ounce of cabbage contains 1,000 times more estrogen than an ounce of beef from an implanted animal. But you don't see Dr. Oz or Oprah or any of these guys ranting on about how cabbage makes our children develop faster. It never happens. So we've got to put it in context for the consumer. So the question is, how do we put hormones in cattle into context for the consumer? Well, the simple answer is we blind them with science, right? We give them the facts and the figures and everything's happy. We can tell them, and this is some data that we presented at the ASAS meetings in Indianapolis this last summer, we can show them that if we use a beta agonist in the feedlot and if we use implants in the backgrounder and the feedlot, we cut the carbon footprint by nearly 11%. We use 4.2 tons less feed per 800-pound hot weight beef carcass. We use 1 acre less land, and we use 22,722 gallons less water per carcass. Yay! And they're going to look at you and go, "I can't even picture 7 gallons of water. I have no idea what 22,722 gallons of water looks like." And I've always been safe in saying that until I had a firefighter in the audience about 3 weeks ago who said, "Yes, I know how much it is." And I'm like, "Oh, great, go you. You just ruined my joke," basically. So to the consumer, this is all good. This is all data. What does an acre look like? Is it a big amount or is it a small amount? Is it a parking lot or is it half a city? People don't know, which is fine. It makes sense. So we can't sell it on the basis of it saves land, it saves water. They care about that, they're not going to pay more for it. We can't sell it on the basis of economics because it's, well, if it makes the beef more affordable, then doesn't that make it cheap beef? And if it's cheap beef, I don't want to buy it because that sounds as if it must be bad for me. Cheap is that like bad word. So what do we have left? Social acceptability-wise? Well, as an example, just last year, we lost LFTB, lean finely textured beef, otherwise known as pink slime, the term coined by Jamie Oliver, my British compatriot. Yay, go Jamie Oliver. Really loved him for that one. So, that came at a cost. We took LFTB, lean finely textured beef, out of the beef supply. And it came at a cost, because that meant we needed more beef from more cattle to maintain that 26.1 billion pounds of beef per year. We needed 1.7 more cattle in total to make the same amount of beef, because we suddenly lost something that had been part of the beef industry for over 30 years. And it came at an economic cost. The beef retail price went up by 1.6%. Now, to me personally, that increase didn't make a huge difference. To most of you, I would guess that doesn't really make that much difference. But to a single mom earning 15 grand a year with 4 kids, that may put beef off the menu automatically, instantly, because even this relatively small increase has a dent into her income. So anything that we do without a scientific foundation based on fear and hormones are going to kill us or pink slime must be bad is going to have an impact both on an environmental basis and an economic basis. So as I say, how do we sell it to the consumer? Well, on a global basis, 1 in 7 kids doesn't have enough food. And that global average is an average from Dallas, Fort Worth, to Chicago, to Manhattan, Kansas, to Manhattan, New York, to France, to Ireland, to Ethiopia, to India. There are 1 in 7 kids that at the moment don't have enough food. But in all honesty, it's difficult to care more about a child in India, or Africa, or China, than it is about our kids. And these are my nieces, and obviously they are the most beautiful, fabulous, perfect kids in the entire world, until this one's born in January, when she will be the most perfect, beautiful, fabulous child in the whole world, because that's how we think, right? We love our families, our kids, our grandkids, our nephews, our nieces. So given that even in this city here, we will have kids that don't have enough food, whose only good source of protein on a guaranteed daily basis comes from school meals, shouldn't we as consumers all care about that? So again, we did the calculation. This is simply the extra beef on one animal given a beta agonist in the feedlot and implants. The extra beef, not the total, but the extra, will supply 7 children with their beef-containing school meals for 1 entire year. So we can feed more hungry kids with safe, affordable protein every single day. I should point out that I did this calculation before they reformed the school lunch plan. Now a serving size for beef in a school is about that big. This much beef could probably supply, 473 kids, because it's changed a little. But the point still becomes the same. If we can feed more kids with a protein that tastes good, that they enjoy every single day, shouldn't we be doing that? And even if hormones and beta agonists are these frightening, frightening things, I think we can all agree that cattle health and welfare is really important. Those of us who have cats or dogs or ferrets or rabbits or fish care about their health, their welfare. The companion animal health industry makes billions of dollars every year selling flea guard and heartworm preparations and lungworm tablets and so on, because we care about the health and welfare of our pets. Shouldn't the same courtesy be extended to the cattle industry? Shouldn't all of our cows be healthy, not have ticks or worms or fleas or whatever every single day? Well, if we think about it that way, again, we're improving the health and welfare of the herd. And the average cow-calf herd in the States only contains 40 cows. If we use effective parasite control in that herd, we get more cows having a calf every single year. That goes up from 81% to 91%. We have calves that wean at about 550 pounds versus 500 pounds. And we have a growth rate overall that goes up from about 2.4 pounds per day to about 2.9 pounds per day. If we see all of those improvements, we get more beef out of that herd. And just that extra beef, again, not the total, but just the extra, will supply 19 families with their annual beef supply. Again, it's feeding more hungry people with safe, approved by the FDA, technologies, which are going to be a positive thing. Which leads me to my last couple of slides. This was a picture that I put on Facebook about just over a year ago now, about 13 months ago. A friend at the University of Montana, to which I should say boo hiss because I'm MSU, but anyway, asked me to calculate how many people we feed on an annual basis with the beef that eventually is made that comes off the cow-calf operations in our state. Montana is beautiful, and one of the things that I like best about it is we have less than 1 million people and we have 1.456 million cows. So there's basically 1.5 cows per person, which I think is, pretty awesome. But anyway, on an annual basis, we supply 12.2 million people with their annual beef demand per year. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I put that bit of data on the top of a picture of the pasture behind my house, and I put it on Facebook. And I put it on Facebook on a Monday morning. And I know it was a Monday morning because I was in Minneapolis Airport going somewhere. I spoke again at a conference on the following Sunday morning, so 7 days later, basically. And that picture had been shared by 450 people. I thought it'd be liked by about 5, and I would feel really, really good and pumped up about that. It was shared by 450. Now, apparently the average Facebook person has 220 friends, which means there are lots of people with 3 Facebook friends, which seems really weird. But anyway, the average person has 220 Facebook friends. So in 7 days, this was potentially seen by 100,000 people. And not just ag people. People who work in Walmart, who work as attorneys, who work as social workers, teachers, train drivers, whatever. All of our friends and our aunts and our uncles and our crazy cousins in California, all of those people see these kind of things on Facebook every day, and they trust it because it comes from us, their friends and their family. And according to research, 66% of us trust our friends and family, which seems really good until we think about the fact that a third of people don't trust their friends and family, and that makes far more sense to me. So because I had time, I did the same calculation for Kansas. And I say time as if it took me 15 hours to do it. But because of the way the sheet is maintained, all I actually had to do was change a single number. But it sounds good, right? I had time this afternoon after being in the ER, so I calculated this number for you. So, in Kansas, you have slightly fewer cow-calf operations than we do. So, and this is just based on the number of calves born, okay? So this isn't based on the number of cattle that you background or you finish in a feedlot from other areas, but simply based on the calves that are born in the state, and your ratio is slightly different because you have, I think 1.4 million cows, but you have 2.89 million people. So you have 2 people per cow, which is far less good than Montana. But anyway, you feed, as a state, 12 million people per year with their annual beef demand. Again, that's a positive message. That's something that to our friends, our family, our cousins, our roommate from the first year who disappeared off to Pennsylvania and was never seen again, all of those people who don't understand why we do what we do, these send powerful messages. So if you are animal science, if you are pre-vet, if you are ag in any way, shape or form, please use your Facebook for more than, as I do, pictures of brownies and cookies and so on, but also good bits of information about beef, things that people can take home and think about and go, wow, maybe we should eat that beef. So as I said at the beginning, my plan is to give you facts and figures and talking points and numbers to defend the misinformation that we have about beef every single day. If you have questions now, I'm happy to answer them. If you think about things in a day, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years even, you have my contact information here. My email's at the top. I'm on Twitter as Bovidiva, which is a name somebody else gave me. I didn't take it on myself. But anyway, I have a blog at bovidiva.com, and there's a copy of this presentation as a PDF document at the link at the bottom. As I say, I'm happy to answer questions if we have time. I have no idea what the time is. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you.